Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. Well, actually today's range report is going to be more of a discussion. I don't have a lot of ammunition to shoot through this rifle, but it is a Milsurp rifle and probably one that you recognize. This, of course, is a Russian Mosin-Nagant. It's a long boy, isn't it? Yeah, this is another Milsurp rifle, and I'm so glad that I'm getting a chance to shoot one of these because, believe it or not, I've never actually shot one before. Even though there have been millions upon millions of these made, they're still found on battlefields today, and many of them entered the United States and entered the military surplus market, and you used to be able to get them for less than $100. Sporting goods stores and military surplus stores used to have these things by the crateful, and I've actually never owned one and never shot one before now. So the Mosin-Nagant entered service in 1891, and it's still found in the Russian military today. They're actually giving some of these to conscripts in the Ukraine war, and that makes this rifle the longest serving battle rifle or military rifle in history. Also, the cartridge that this thing is chambered in, 7.62 by 54R, is also the longest serving cartridge in the world. I guess that really is a testament to the durability of these rifles. This particular example was made in 1938, and it is the 9130 variant as far as I can tell because it is a full-length rifle. There are many other carbine variants. This is obviously not one of them. Now, I do not claim to be an expert on the Mosin-Nagant, and there are pages upon pages of information out there on the internet and a lot of books that are written about this rifle. So I'm not going to try to cover all of that in today's video, but if you're really interested in all those variants, I highly suggest you go check out a wonderful YouTube channel by the name of Forgotten Weapons. Ian over there knows a lot about these. He's produced a lot of videos on variants of these rifles, and you can learn a lot about their history. But today we're just kind of doing a little bit of a survey and giving you guys my personal thoughts and experiences on shooting this really cool rifle for the very first time. But I want to thank the people that made this video possible before we go into the things that I like and don't like and show you what little shooting footage I have. I want to thank the person that lent this to the channel. He's a local subscriber and fan, Ken, thank you so much for lending this to the channel. You also lent me some ammo, and I also got some ammo from another local subscriber named Craig. So Craig, thank you for that. I want to thank my Patreons as always, because through their monthly donation and support, they help keep the lights on around here and help keep the project of the Texas Gun Vault going. And if you guys want to join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, you get to see all these videos early. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor for all of my range reports, my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Brownworks. Brownworks has been a sponsor of the Texas Gun Vault for some time. If you're not familiar with them, Mark over there is an artist. He's a craftsman. He makes some of the best wood panel grips for a wide variety of firearms out of a wide variety of exotic woods and materials. I'm going to put a link to his website in the comments section below. I want you guys to go over there, check out and see what he has to offer. He is always creating new and innovative things such as wood panel grips for AR-15s. He can put art and custom logos and custom textures on all of the grips that he makes, and they're all one of a kind. I know a lot of people that have bought grips from Brownworks, and they have only been very happy, and his customer service is amazing. So please go check out his website. If you don't find what you're looking for down there, make sure to contact Mark. I know that he'll hook you up, and when you do contact him, please tell him the Texas Gun Vault sent you. Alright, so every time I get a gun here to the channel, I like to talk about the things that I like and don't like before I shoot the gun. And I always want to start with the positive first. Let's talk about what I like about this rifle. And first, it's the history. Man, do I love guns. I am a collector, and what I like about guns more than anything else is their history. Because I believe the story of the human experience is told through the gun. Because they have decided battles and created empires and have been pretty much the deciding factor in the course of human history in the past multiple hundred years. And so the Mosin-Nagant has been around for a long time. I've already told you it went into service in 1891. And it can still be found in battlefields today. When our U.S. military went up against the Taliban, they were going up against some that were armed with the Mosin-Nagant. And that just shows you how robust this design is. It's pretty amazing that guns that could have been made over 100 years ago are still found in working condition on battlefields today. It's still used in the Ukraine war, and probably Russia hasn't made any of these in 60, 70, or 80 years. That's really interesting. And the battles that the Mosin-Nagant was in from World War I and World War II and all of the other conflicts around the world that Russia was involved in, this thing has seen a storied past. I also mentioned that there are many variants of this gun. The one that I would personally really like to have is one that actually has a little bit of mystery to it. I believe it's the 9159. It's kind of the last variant that they made, and some people think it was a last-ditch rifle, either made by the Bulgarians or the Russians, in case there was ever a war with NATO or the United States, and they had to hand out a bunch of these to conscripts and civilians. But they were essentially 9130s, but cut down to a carbine length. They have their own interesting markings, and they file down on the rear sights. But I actually went on a couple of places that you can buy and sell guns, and I found out those things go for a lot of money. So I don't know if I'm ever going to spend that type of money on a gun that I don't know if it's really worth that much, because the average Mosin-Nagant was worth about $100 a few years ago. Now they've gone up in price. They're about $300 or $400 as I'm filming this video, but I don't know if I want to spend over $1,000 for a very select variant. But I do know there's a lot of Mosin collectors out there. Another thing about this gun that I really like, which was indicative of many military rifles of the era, is I like it when the cocking handle or the charging handle, or what do you want to call this, the bolt handle, is straight. I find that to be more ergonomic. That bolt handle, I don't like it to be curved. I find that I can manipulate a straight bolt handle a lot more. And one of the things that I don't like is when people sporterize these and they actually bend that handle down. They do that to a lot of military surplus guns when they turn them into hunting guns. I have always liked that straight handle. Another thing about this gun that I really like is the fact that it is so simple. And that's always kind of been the Russian philosophy of firearms. You make a robust design that is very simple, that the average peasant or conscript could be able to use. And that's essentially what the Mosin is. There's not a lot of moving parts. There's very few parts, just like an AK-47. The tolerances are going to be kind of loose, but that's what makes this gun so suited for its purpose, especially in its time. It followed the rule of KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. It's not overly complex, it's not overly engineered, but it's well built. All right, so now let's talk about a couple things about this gun that I don't like. And there's really not that much, just holding it here on the workbench. Something I do not like when it comes to military rifles or bolt-action rifles is a cock on open. I'm a big fan of cock on close, and the reason that is when I want to unlock the gun, I want as little effort to have to go into that as possible. And I actually find that this mechanism, which by the way is not that quick, it's not that refined, that if you have a cock on open, it can kind of slow down, especially if you're trying to extract a round. So it's just my personal preference. I know some people prefer cock on open, but I prefer cock on close. I'm also not a big fan of the overall length of the firearm, and I know that when this gun was initially designed, the battlefield was very different than it is today, or even during World War II. But even in the era of World War I, with trench warfare and World War II, the size and barrel length of this rifle is simply just too long. I know the philosophy was engagements at 500, 600, 700 yards or further, but as modern warfare developed, those engagements became closer and closer, and having such a long rifle is a little bit cumbersome. You can't use it in enclosed spaces. And I even find that just holding it and trying to enjoy it at the range, having a 9130 variant, it's just a little bit too long, and probably having a carbine variant of this would be much more enjoyable. The last thing that I don't like, which I really can't blame it for because once again it's an artifact of the time, it's only a 5-round magazine. And can you imagine if militaries around the world at the time of the adoption of rifles like this would have had 15 or 20 round magazines? Now, as I said, I know the philosophy of use of this rifle in the battlefield of the time was very different. But having much more ammunition on hand and being able to lay down suppressive fire would have honestly changed the battlefield. Now, I know back then it was one shot, one kill. They didn't use ammunition like they use today, but I really think one of the disadvantages to rifles of this era were the 5-shot magazines. There were a few that held more, and I think those are honestly the more superior rifles. So having to constantly load this only after 5 shots all the time, whether you single load it or you put in stripper clips, it's still a little bit tiresome, and I can only imagine the stress of being in a trench or on the battlefield and having to constantly reload your rifle. It probably would have been pretty scary times. All right, so let's get this thing to the range. Now, I have very limited ammunition. I just don't keep 7.62 by 54R around, so we're just going to shoot this thing 3 times, a total of 15 rounds. And as I said, this is not really a range report, plus it's an old gun and it's not mine, and I don't want to hurt it or damage it in any way, so I'm going to kind of baby it a little bit, but I want to get the experience of shooting a Mosin-Nagant. So we're first going to set up the target at just an easy 25 yards. I just want to get the experience of shooting one of these. I just don't know what the recoil is going to be like, really what the trigger pull is going to be like. Is the action going to be hard to manipulate? Well, we're just going to find out. So here we go, just my first shots to see what this rifle feels like when I shoot it. And the first thing I want to note about this rifle is it is a lot harder hitting than I was expecting. 7.62 by 54R is a full power rifle cartridge, but this metal butt plate in the back does absolutely nothing to dampen the recoil. It kind of surprised me. Not that it was unmanageable or that it hurt, it was just more than what I was expecting. I also noticed that when you run the bolt, it's definitely a little bit clanky and it's not as refined as other military surplus bolt action rifles I have shot. And that's something else people have mentioned to me about the Mosin-Nagant. And then there's the sights. These are pretty darn simple sights. The rear sight is mounted pretty far up, and I can see if you use corrective lenses or are of poor eyesight, these iron sights might be a little bit difficult to use. And I was of course using this in a dimly lit range, and I was struggling with them for a while before I got used to them. So I definitely think that's a big downside to this rifle, and it makes me appreciate modern sighting systems and especially optics more and more as I shoot guns like this. The trigger in this is okay, I guess. You really can't stage it. There's no wall to it. It's pretty heavy. It's not unreasonable, but I can't always predict when the striker is going to fall. So it's an okay manageable trigger, as I mentioned, but it's definitely not a target trigger. All right, so I want to see if I can do any better with this grouping. I'm going to shoot for the same target, but now I'm going to bench rest it still at the same distance. I'm having a hard time with these sights in this dimly lit range, so hopefully I could do a little bit better. So let me try 5 more rounds and bench rest it.
Mosin-Nagant.
And I did even worse bench resting this thing. And I think it has to do with a number of conditions. I've already told you about the trigger. I just cannot predict the breaking of the trigger. There is no staging of that trigger. And then when it comes to the sights, the rear sight, the notch is simply too small. It's very hard for me to use and put that front sight post right where I want it. And that front sight post is actually pretty thick. And I can only imagine what trying to hit a target at 200, 300, or 400 yards using these iron sights must have been like. Yeah, the sights on these would definitely need an upgrade. But of course, this is a historical rifle and I would just leave them the way they are. But I can understand why a lot of people sporterize these and might have changed those out. All right, so now I'm gonna set up the target at 75 yards. I'm still gonna bench rest this thing. I'm gonna go for the center target. I definitely think I'm not gonna do well. I know this thing is shooting high, but I just wanna see what I can do and just get the experience of shooting a Mosin-Nagant. And I know some of you guys that shoot these guns all the time are laughing at me, and it's okay. You guys know that I'm actually a pretty decent shot depending on the gun. I am just not shooting this thing well at all. And I think it has a lot to do with the sights and the trigger. And I would like to know what your experiences are with a rifle like this. Are you guys experiencing the same things that I do? I'm not really that well versed in guns like this, but I'm very excited to get to shoot them because of their history. But here we go, 75 yards, another 5 rounds for the center target, and let's see how I do.
I was not aiming for the left.
And man, am I a little bit embarrassed by that. But if that would have been a human-sized silhouette at that distance, I still would have landed those shots. But this is definitely not a target rifle. And I'm definitely blaming the sights on this one. You guys know that I can shoot pretty decently. I just don't shoot this one well at all. Now, when I compare this to the other Milsurp rifles that I've shot in the past, like the Gewehr 98, I really would like to shoot an M1903 Springfield, but I have shot a Lee Enfield. All those other rifles, I think, are way better than this one. They're more refined, they're better built, and they're easier to use. I think it just has to go back to the philosophy of use and the design of this gun and for who it was built for. It kind of falls into that Russian philosophy of small arms. Built well enough, loose tolerances, and designed for peasants and conscripts. It's not designed to be a tack driver. It's designed to be a battle implement and pretty cheap to manufacture. And I think that has a lot to do with its reputation today. It's definitely fun to shoot, and if I ever got into collecting military surplus rifles, I definitely would have to have one. I don't see myself ever becoming a collector of them or wanting to get all of the different variants, but it is historically interesting, and I think that's what this gun holds the most for me, is that it has such a storied past. So on my star system, how would I rank the Mosin-Nagant, chambered in 7.62 by 54R? Well, when I consider what the gun really is and how it performed for me, I can only give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I feel like there are better rifles from this era that this rifle went up against on the battlefield that are simply superior weapons. It's a crude rifle. It's simple. It definitely does its job, and it has a historical past. But honestly, when it comes to being some type of target rifle or something fun to shoot at the range, I just don't enjoy it as much. This gun pretty much only holds that historical interest for me more than anything else. But it is cool. It does work, and I totally understand why it's still seen in battlefields today. There were so many of them made, and they simply work. They're kind of like AKs of bolt-action rifles. They might not be the most accurate, but they just work, and they probably can take a beating and keep on going. So, yeah, what a cool and interesting rifle to get a chance to shoot. So thank you, Ken. I've never shot one of these before, and I'm so glad that I did, because I kind of wanted one a little bit more than I do now. But who knows, maybe one day I will pick one up. So as I said, I know this is more of a discussion than it is a range report due to the limited ammo that I had. But I want to ask you guys, do you guys own a Mosin? Have you ever shot a Mosin? And do your experiences mirror mine? Or are these tack drivers for you that you can hit targets at 1,000 yards? I really would like to know. I know this isn't the type of gun I normally shoot, and I'll kind of say, well, maybe my shot placement was because of that. But I would like to know if your experiences mirror mine, because maybe I'm doing it wrong, maybe I'm doing it right, or maybe it's just the gun's fault. I want to have a great discussion in the comment section below. So, as always, thanks for watching.